What's really misunderstood about anxiety is that anxiety is an alarm that we often confuse for a threat itself. And an alarm is not the same as a threat. An alarm, you think about your smoke detector in your house. How many, I mean, I don't know about you, maybe I have bad smoke detectors, but my smoke detectors go off if something's burning in the oven, if someone takes too hot of a shower, if it needs a new battery. Knock on wood, may the force be with me, God willing the creek don't rise. I have never had a fire alarm go off because there was an actual fire.
Fire, right.
Right? And so we've sort of, I think this is very instructive because, or another good example with fire alarms is how many times have you been in an elementary school or a hotel where all of a sudden in the middle of the night, everybody was outside because their little fire alarm went off. There's no fire, you know, this drill or something, but is no fire. And so our anxiety is an alarm that we've started to treat as a problem itself, as a threat itself. And it's not. It's an indicator light that we need to pay attention that there might be something that's problematic for us.
Hi, I'm Lennis Woods Mullins, and I love to help women to vibe, to be more vibrant, intuitive, beautiful, and empowered in midlife. So come on, let's vibe.
Hey, everyone. I'm so glad that you've taken some time to listen to the podcast. You know, we've had some really amazing guests on the show who have talked so much about topics and things that maybe we don't always discuss all the time. You know, we might think about it a little bit, but we don't really go into it, or perhaps it hasn't even come into our frame of reference. And that's why I'm so excited to introduce to you our guest today, Lindsey Carnick, who is a psychotherapist, and she in particular works with adult individuals and couples who want to change their lives. Isn't that the case? All of us want to have a change, but it's interesting. How do we go about making that change? And the other thing is that she's really passionate about is just helping people with how they might encode the world. You know, we go through life with all these different thoughts and feelings. Some of them are accurate, some of them aren't. And sometimes we need some help in maneuvering that journey we call life. Thanks so much for being with us, Lindsey. It's wonderful to have you here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here, Lennis.
Tell me a little bit about you and your background and what it is that you do and why you are so passionate about what you do.
I'm a clinical social worker, which means I'm a psychotherapist. And originally, I wanted to be in policy. I was very interested in policy and macro level change and how the macros affect people's individual lives. And that was very, very important to me. And when I got out of graduate school, having been trained as both a therapist and sort of a macro level analyst, I had this really remarkable opportunity, which was to work in a prison for juvenile offenders. And that experience was remarkable for me and so important to me. And that was where I really sort of fell in love with individual level work as opposed to that macro level work, which I still deeply believe in and think is tremendously important. But the individual work really stood out to me at that point. And that's kind of how I got started as an individual level therapist.
You know, I'm curious about something because there's so many things that happen in the course of our careers that cause us to change or want to switch gears. You've been doing what you're doing for a long time. What is it about what you're doing that you love so much?
Well, at the most basic level, I really love other people. I find people to be very interesting and very engaging and very fun. And people amaze me. People's ways of encountering the world amaze me. And the meaning that people are able to make out of their lives and the resilience that people have, especially people who don't think they do, the resilience with which they are getting through is tremendous, and the impact that they have on other people. And I find all of that endlessly inspiring, quite frankly.
You know, that's interesting. You're saying that, you know, people, we have a tendency to think one way in terms of what's going on. And then we're probably viewed in a totally another way. And then there's the truth. You know, and sometimes nary the three meet. You know, it's interesting. But and why is that? And what can we do to begin to start changing some of that wrong thinking? In fact, we talked about this a little bit before we came on today. And one of the ideas you had for episode title was your brain wants to believe thinking is the answer It's lying to you. And I was like, wow, that sounds interesting. But then I began thinking about something that I suffer from, which is, probably close to what this is about. And that is the whole idea of overthinking. Why do we do that?
Well, look, thinking has been a tremendously successful strategy for most of us under most conditions, right? It's been tremendously successful for us as a species. We are, I don't want to go too far out on an anthropological limb here that I'm not qualified for, but there's evidence to suggest that at this point in time, we're the species that's got the market cornered on abstract thought. And that allows us to do really remarkable things. And we have abstract language and we can think in symbols. And this allows us to dominate our environments and problem solve in spectacular ways. So it's been reinforced for us through experience for a long time that thinking is the kingmaker of strategies, right? And it's so funny because to me, even in our language, you hear people refer to thinking, they'll say something like, oh, well, I didn't think that through well enough, or oh, I didn't think about that quite right, as if thinking itself is infallible as a strategy. And if the outcome wasn't what you wanted, then you sort of didn't think about it right. But the thinking is not to be blamed under any conditions. Thinking is a perfect strategy. And the difficulty for most people comes in when we bump up against the fact that our internal world isn't the same as the external world. And so thinking in the external world and in external world problem solving is fantastic. There's probably no better strategy for the external world. But the same rules don't really apply in the internal world. And when we try and think our way out of our emotional experience or our relational experiences, we tend to get very, very frustrated because our feelings do not respond to our thinkings the way we want them to, or the way we expect them to, based on our experience with how the external world responds to our thinkings. So the tendency for most of us, myself included, is to double down on thinking because, again, it's historically such a
And to
reliable
discount the
tool.
feelings. Right.
Yeah.
And to discount, it's interesting because feelings don't necessarily have to be based upon something that's happening right now, although they might exhibit in the present. Many times feelings have to do with an accumulation of things that have happened over time. And so therefore there's a trigger or something happens and that's how you feel about that thing. So how does one begin to recognize the fact that even though those feelings may not be exactly what's happening, they still need to be honored and recognized?
Yes, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think part of the solution that we're looking for is to be able to hold both things at one time, sort of to hold in each hand, go the feelings and the thinkings, and go sort of these things can coexist without them reinforcing each other. I'll give you an example I love. I sort of like scratch tickets. It's my one vice. I really like those $1 scratch tickets. And every time I buy a scratch ticket, it feels like a winner to the depths of my soul. I mean, it feels like a winner, right?
Right,
Now,
right.
if you ask me intellectually, Lindsey, seriously, do you actually think that one's a winner? I'm going to go, no. I mean, the odds are 10 gazillion to 1 or whatever they are. I can have a different set of thinkings that is completely antithetical to my feelings, and yet it doesn't negate the feelings, right? It doesn't cancel out the feelings. And we can see this play out. I think it's interesting when you talk to little kids, a lot of times, little kids are very good at conflating fact and feeling. So if you get a little kid who's on the playground and they're angry and they say, oh, what are you angry about? And they go like, that kid over there made a mean face at me. You know what I mean? They've got the conviction that this is how it happened. And you go, I mean, did they? That seems to be looking in the complete opposite direction. Are you sure that's how it happened? He took my dump truck, and these are all sort of facts that have come from feelings, a feeling of being wronged or a feeling that someone looked at you the wrong way, these kinds of things. But it's so human for us to do this. I mean, this is the most human thing possibly we do. Some people refer this to your gut. Oh, I just have a gut feeling that that's what's true. I have a gut feeling that lottery ticket's a winner. But see, also that hasn't happened all the time.
Right.
And so I think part of it is to really be okay with and honor the fact that the two things can be different, and that doesn't really negate or invalidate one or the other. It just means that frequently feelings and thinkings don't line up, and they don't have to. an interesting thing about adults versus kids is we have more of a chance to act on our thinkings as opposed to our feelings. We might say that's like the only difference between children and adults is that adults hopefully have a little more impulse control and have an ability to recognize, ooh, I feel like, for example, righteously bawling that person out or, giving them a piece of my mind. And I think that's probably not the constructive answer to my future, right? That's going to not serve me well, even though it might feel good for 2.5 seconds until, there's a consequence for that I won't like. So, a lot of times I talk to people who are trying to change their real world behavior or patterns by not having their feelings. They go, I got to stop feeling like this so I can stop acting like that. And I think that's a real tall order. I don't know
I was going to say, isn't that kind of like not thinking about elephants for the next 5 minutes? And then
100%. That's so funny you say that because I love that example. Don't think about the pink elephant. You haven't thought about a pink elephant ever until I said that, right? Yeah,
correct.
100%. And when we try and not have a feeling, that's not a thing. You can't not have a feeling. If you're having it, you're having it. We call that stuffing, right? Or bottling stuff up. That goes a separate place altogether. So really the name of the game for most of us is honoring that feeling and honoring that you can have that feeling and do something different according to some other set of animating principles.
How do you begin to arrive at that? Because that involves some unlearning of behavior and thought processes. So how do you walk someone that you're working with? How do you walk them through that?
Yes. Couple things. One is slowness. When people, I think it's become a little bit of a cliche at this point when people say, take a few deep breaths or take 10 deep breaths or something like this. The virtue of taking a few deep breaths is that it allows you the space between your initial reaction, which is what happens automatically, and your response, which is something you choose. And what we're really talking about is acknowledging the reaction you're having, whatever that is, and then choosing a response that is reflective of your values or your goals or your aspirations, right? So a classic example would be you're in a workplace and somebody says something out of pocket that does not land well, and your immediate reaction is, it's to in some way retaliate or come across the table at this person or all the things that people talk about doing when they feel aggravated or vexed or sort of worked up. And if we can take a minute and literally slow ourselves down enough to label that as a reaction and then ask ourselves, okay, and now what do I want my response to be? Right? And to distinguish between the two, because very often our reactions become our responses because we don't slow down enough to have both of them, or we don't believe it's possible to have both. And it is possible to have both. Every adult knows that. And here's how I know that. Every adult has had an experience in which the classic one would be you get pulled over for speeding, you pulled over for rolling a stop sign or something, and you are feeling not polite, right? That this has happened. You are feeling possibly hostile towards this person who's walking up to your car and is about to write you a really big ticket that you are not wanting, right? You are having feels about this. That is your reaction, right? And every adult I know has managed in that situation to choose to be polite, nonetheless, to choose to, engage in a way that's constructive and minimizes the consequences, not maximizes the consequences, right? We all have these moments. We have moments where, you're in a grocery store line and the person, 4 people in front of you is asking 500 questions about an item they're trying to purchase. And you're going, oh my gosh, this is supposed to be the quick lane. Can we please not do this here? Right. And there's some part of you that wants to say something that is rude, right? And short and snippy, but you don't do it. You choose a response that is other than that initial reaction. And it doesn't have anything to do with stuffing the reaction. It simply has to do with acting in alignment with your values. And your value is, hey, I don't go.
It is interesting too, because there is power in the pause. Absolutely. So many times. And I think some of it has to do with life experience. As we go on, we begin to understand that, respond to everything, but not just that. When you take the time to pause, take a deep breath, something from a purely physical thing happens. You're taking that deep breath, fresh oxygen is coming in that's turning into red blood cells that goes to the brain, and you're thinking a little bit more clearly than you were before you took that deep breath. And I always say, because I truly do believe this, we are a nation of non-breathers. We walk around holding our breath in anticipation of the next thing. And lately, it's been a lot of that for everyone because it's just been so unpredictable and so many things are happening. Was it everything, everywhere, all at once, whatever that movie was called? That's kind of how it's been lately with all the different things that are coming out right now. And so you find yourself holding your breath in anticipation of the next thing. And when you hold yourself that way, you're not really taking a pause, because taking a pause involves stopping whatever it is that you're doing, taking a deep breath, and almost like resetting your brain.
It really does. It's so true. I think we don't give the pause nearly enough credit, you know. And the other interesting thing is, you know, maybe I've heard many times people say, oh, there's a magic number at 10, you know, count to 10, or a count of something. They pick a number, you know, count to this many before you respond if you're feeling upset or tense or whatever the thing is. And I always thought there was an interesting wisdom buried in that, because if nothing else, by counting to 5 or counting to 10 or taking X number of deep breaths, you are literally buying yourself time. And in the purchase of that time, metabolically speaking, all of the things that happen when we become escalated, the wave is cresting and falling in that time. And if you can literally buy yourself enough time by sort of setting the standard of, I take 10 deep breaths, or I take a count of 5 Mississippi, or whatever it is you pick, you've literally bought yourself this time window for the agitation wave to crest and start coming back down the other side. And you will probably find that on the tail end of that wave, it is more actionable for you to be in alignment with what you know or what your values are versus whatever reaction you had, which is also real, but may not be true, right? There's a difference between real and true.
Absolutely. And I said before, our feelings aren't always an accurate Geiger counter of what's really going on. But easier said than done to let go of things that, you know, you're really upset about. How do you go about doing that? Just letting things go without reacting. I know you said taking a pause and stuff, but I believe there's probably even more things, more tools that we can use. What are some of the other tools we could use?
Yes. I think, well, first, I'd like to say that I think letting go is a process. I don't know that I've ever been successful just letting go of something the minute I wanted to let go of it. For me, it's usually a process. If it's enough to be something I need to let go of, then it's probably going to take me more than just that isolated moment in time. And so the deal I've made with myself is that I can go back to anything. I can go back to those feelings. They're going to be there for me. And that in the moment, choosing to act in accordance with my values, right, or choosing to be constructive, isn't giving up on my own feelings or denying my own feelings or failing to honor my own feelings. It's simply making a choice that's constructive in that moment so that I can actually come back to those feelings later in a way that won't be destructive.
Understood.
And I think that's an important differentiation. You know, sometimes I think we have this sense, many of us have a sense, that to be peaceful when we're feeling something other than peaceful is to capitulate to the person or the situation. It's somehow giving in or giving them a free pass or letting them off the hook. And I get that. And also, I want to have maximum freedom later. And maximum freedom later for me means being peaceful in the moment, not making something worse for myself, and then being able to sit down by myself in the calm of being by myself and say, okay, what just happened for me there? What do I need? Maybe I do need something else from that person. And I'm perfectly comfortable going back to that person and saying, as it turns out, I've been reflecting and here's really what I wanted to say to you, or here's really what I need you to hear. And I can always do that later. There is no
Right.
statute of
It's
limitations on these things.
not so much about controlling your feelings in a way that you'll never address them. It's just kind of putting a stopgap measure for right now and either revisiting it later or maybe actually going back to that person and having a discussion where maybe your feelings aren't as escalated.
100%.
Yeah, that's interesting because I'm thinking, okay, you think about the tools and what you should do and everything else, but you don't want to get into another kind of behavior that might cause you even more frustration, and that's overthinking it. So, how do you stop your overthinking but still address the idea of your feelings and that you're not going to deal with them now, but you'll go back to it later? How does this all flow so that we don't end up going nuts?
Yes, I love that. I think that is the crux $1 million question that most of us are facing several times a day. I think a couple things. One is most of us are pretty good at recognizing when we're caught up in a thinking spiral. Pretty aware of that, right? The $1 million question is, how do I find the exit ramp? Where is the exit ramp out of the thinking spiral? Not am I in it or am I not in it? And something that I love is a very simple question, simple but not simplistic. And the question is it happening right now? It being whatever we're caught up in the thinking spiral. Because often the overthinking spirals are a lot like movies. You know how you can be sitting in a movie theater or on your couch or whatever watching a movie, and you get so wrapped up in this movie that you don't notice that you've eaten this entire thing of popcorn. At the end, it's like, where'd that popcorn go? I don't remember having a single bite. It was like an out-of-body experience, right? Because you were so focused on this thing. And B, you watch a Mission Impossible movie and you see there's poor old Tom Cruise hanging off a helicopter rudder or whatever it is he's doing, and your heart's pounding out of your chest, right? Your whole body reacts to that as if it were actually happening. Even though you know perfectly well that no one ever sat around eating popcorn while somebody actually was, hanging from a helicopter. This is not how those situations work. So even though there's all this evidence to tell us that's not happening right now, every fiber of our neurology goes, oh, yes, it is. Heart's pumping, right? You're sweating. You're like, no, don't go in there. All the things we shout at movie theaters. No, Tom, hang on, whatever. And if we can slow down and ask ourselves, wait a minute, this thinking spiral that I'm caught up in, is it happening right now? And I mean right now, in this environment where I am with what's going on, is it happening? And what's powerful about that question is it helps snap us out of these mind movies that this gets back to abstract thought and our ability to think in ways that other animals probably do not, is we can invent and live in these fantasy possibilities about what might happen 10 minutes from now, 20 minutes from now, 2 days from now, 2 weeks from now, 2 months from now. And there may be a grain or more of truth to what we're imagining, but usually it's not what's happening right now. And so to anchor ourselves back in the here and now is usually the gentlest, most sustainable off-ramp from overthinking spirals. And anchoring ourselves in the here and now can be as simple as literally reaching out and touching something that's in your immediate environment.
Right.
And reminding yourself
you're staying present. And
that you're present.
Yes, I had to learn how to do that. It's interesting because I had an anxiety disorder for years and years and years, and it wasn't even properly diagnosed for years. And the causation was not properly diagnosed until years later as a result of my doing what I do now. I just learned from a menopausal perspective, there were two things going on with me. I had menopausal anxiety. That's a real thing. Gynecologists don't always refer to it, but it's real. And the other thing was post-traumatic stress, centered around how I found out about the fact that my mother was hit by a fire truck on her way to work. So the idea became, in that scenario, over the years, to control the outcome, never have any surprises, control. And then the hormonal piece came in with my menopause and low high cortisol levels and low estrogen, feelings of anxiety. And so what would happen is that when I would wake up in the morning, I would feel like I was going straight downhill in a roller coaster with no restraints. And that went on for years. And the only thing that seemed to set it right was coffee. And I had never drank coffee. I didn't start drinking coffee until I was like 50. Now, the thing that's interesting about this and why I'm even mentioning this is that these symptoms and things came over time. It wasn't all at once. I wasn't checking in with myself and having a real reality check about how I was feeling. I was just pushing things back, stepping, emotions back, till finally my emotional closet became filled. It's kind of like the thing you put a bunch of stuff in the closet and then you say, okay, I'm open to put one more thing in there, and you do it. Everything comes falling out. And then you try to put everything back in and you can't do it. You say, how did I get all this stuff in here? Well, it's the same kind of thing when you don't deal with your emotions. And what happened was with me is I had an event. And I ended up having to go to emergency. And then I took a week off. And then I took a sabbatical from my employer. And when it was time for me to go back, I realized that I didn't want to go back. I wanted to work with women to help them with their mind, body, spirit wellness. And one of the things that I learned from a holistic perspective of how to deal with my anxiety was staying present. That even though I still had the hormonal thing going on, which I learned how to balance holistically, I still had that other part going on that came from the post-traumatic stress. So rather than focus on the past because I cannot change it, or focus on the future because I cannot predict it, it's staying present. And sometimes it's, initially it was 30 seconds at a time, 1 minute at a time, 1 hour at a time. I love what you said about just reaching out and reminding yourself, okay, whatever you're thinking about isn't happening right now, because you're right here. And the other thing that I learned through, learning to work through my anxiety is that for me, it was never as bad as I thought it was going to be on the other side of it. Never. In fact, sometimes jumping off the cliff or whatever it was I was afraid to do or thinking about whatever, you get through with it and you're like, wow, that was great, because you had so much pent up about how bad it was going to be, that because it's never as bad as it was going to be. On the other side of that, it's almost exhilarating because it wasn't as bad and it felt kind of good. And I noticed that you said in one of your questions, what's most misunderstood about anxiety? And I know we're talking about other things, but actually they're all kind of counter-dependent, because overthinking is something that can cause anxiety. Stepping back your emotions and not dealing with them is something that can cause anxiety. But what is it that you're saying is most misunderstood about anxiety?
Well, I'd like to defer to one of my favorite thinkers. His name is Chad Lejeune. He's a working psychologist out on the West Coast. And I love his description. Chad Lejeune really digs into the fact that anxiety, we've learned to fear. We've learned to fear the experience of anxiety because it's unpleasant itself, and because we view it as a harbinger of something terrible, right? And the what ifs, right? That's what anxiety is. What if that happens? And he has this wonderful way of pointing out that what's really misunderstood about anxiety is that anxiety is an alarm that we often confuse for a threat itself. And an alarm is not the same as a threat. An alarm, you think about your smoke detector in your house. I don't know about you, maybe I have bad smoke detectors, but my smoke detectors go off if something's burning in the oven, if someone takes too hot of a shower, if it needs a new battery. Knock on wood, may the force be with me, God willing the creek don't rise. I have never had a fire alarm go off because there was an actual fire.
Right.
And so we've I think this is very instructive, because, or another good example with fire alarms is, how many times have you been in an elementary school or a hotel where all of a sudden in the middle of the night, everybody was outside because there was a fire alarm went off. There's no fire, this drill or something, but is no fire. And so our anxiety is an alarm that we've started to treat as a problem itself, as a threat itself. And it's not. It's an indicator light that we need to pay attention that there might be something that's problematic for us. It's not the same as something is problematic. So one of my great projects in life is to recognize my own anxiety instead of go, oh, I feel like there's a problem, so there must be a problem. Where is it? I get to go, I wonder if something's up, as opposed to assuming that something is up.
Right. And as opposed to pushing it back, because you're right. Our bodies give us all kinds of clues, including our brains, in terms of something that's happening. And it could be intrinsic to your intuition, or it could be intrinsic to what's going on with your body in general. But there's all kinds of signs that our body gives us. And one of the things that I learned about anxiety was something similar to what you were saying, is I learned to, rather than step it down, was to go ahead and lean into it, allow myself to feel it. In fact, to help me, I gave it a name, Anxious Annie. And I said, okay, anxious Annie, you can show up for this amount of time. And, this is how we're feeling. But I'm only going to feel like this for about 5 minutes because I have some other things I'm going to do. And I'm going to put you on hold. And that's not to say that the feeling went away totally, but my feeling of being able to produce in spite of it and stay present. And it was a little trick, but it made a difference. And it gave me back my power instead of feeling like anxiety had power over me, that I could choose how long I was going to be anxious. And over time, it just kind of went away. I'm sure, well, I do know part of it was my hormonal levels came back into balance. But I also, through the help of my therapist, like you, developed these tools to help me deal with it. And one of them was definitely, watching the overthinking, not stuffing my feelings, staying present. I mean, all the things that you mentioned. So I'm so glad that you came on here today to share all this because it's so important, especially for midlife women and all the myriad of feelings that we experience.
There's a wonderful tool out there for anybody who wants to see it. You can Google unhelpful thinking patterns, PDF. And you'll get 100 different things, and different universities have made their own version. But what you're going to get is this wonderful document that has 8 little graphic pictures on it. And it describes the 8 types of unhelpful thinking patterns that mostly make up thinking spirals. And I love this tool so much. And I encourage people to print it off and put one on their bathroom mirror and one on their refrigerator and maybe one on the back of their front door, or whatever door they leave in the morning, garage door, whatever it is, so that they bump into it. Because it's a really helpful way to sort of like cue one to, oh, is that what I'm doing right now? And sort of burst the overthinking movie that people get caught up in. It's a really interesting little visual cue. And I also find that for myself and for other people, seeing these thinking patterns sort of illustrated and on paper is incredibly helpful because it makes concrete and discrete this thing that otherwise kind of feels like this morass, this overwhelming morassy
almost pie in the sky kind of thing that just comes.
Yes. And when you look at the sheet, you go, oh, I do that. And oh my gosh, if there's a sheet on this, that means everybody else is doing it too.
No, you're not the only one. Absolutely. Okay, everybody on the show page, first of all, I want you to all go to Lindsey's site. Her site information is there. Check her out. I know you have a virtual practice as well. And also, I'm going to put a link to one of the PDFs that's talking about helpful thinking practices. I'm going to go pick one and put it right here. See?
Perfect.
That is so impactful. Thank you so much.
I have mine. I love it. It's an incredible tool.
I love it. This is wonderful. And thank you so much for all your knowledge, all your wisdom, your service. I like to thank people in the wellness genre for their service because it's so much more than earning a paycheck. It is a service when you're working with people with their mental health, their physical health, all of that. It goes so far beyond, just the act of doing it. You give off little bits and pieces of yourself, and I know you have your own therapist and your own way of dealing with that, but still, I still feel the need to say thank you for your service.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you for the service you're providing. This is such an important space for women, and we need all the advocacy and help and knowledge that we can all get, and community.
Absolutely.
So thank you.
And thank you to all of you who've chosen to spend a little time with us here on the V.I.B.E Living Podcast. We really appreciate it. And please keep liking, commenting, and sharing. Let me know what kinds of things you want to find out about women and how we can be well in our mind, body, and spirit, and how we can continue to be vibrant, intuitive, beautiful, and empowered all throughout midlife and beyond. Thanks so much for listening. Have a fantastic day, and don't forget to vibe. Bye-bye, everybody. Thanks for listening to the V.I.B.E Living Podcast. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment, and share this podcast. Have a fantastic day, and don't forget to vibe. Bye-bye, everybody.